I can't believe I'm the one writing this. But here I am. To keep things confidential, I'll speak in general terms and use fake names. Let's call my husband Deegan and me Jenny. We're both in our 20s and have been married for over 2 years. We crossed paths unexpectedly in public, started chatting, exchanged contact info, and the rest, as they say, is history. It felt like love at first sight, at least for me. We dated for 6 months and then lived together for a year before tying the knot. Due to my parents' insistence, we had a large wedding. They covered all the expenses except for the bar tab and our honeymoon, which Deegan's parents paid for. My parents adore Deegan, and his parents have a deep affection for me. Our marriage has been fantastic, and I wouldn't change a thing. Deegan treats me exceptionally well, and I do the same for him. It's just our natural way of expressing love. Now, you might wonder, what's the issue here? Well, the problem is that I cheated on Deegan with a colleague from work 2 months ago, and now I'm burdened with guilt. Whenever Deegan does something kind for me, I feel terrible inside. I'm overwhelmed with guilt and a sense of not deserving his kindness. In an attempt to make amends for my betrayal, I've been exceptionally attentive to him since we returned from our trip. While we've always been naturally affectionate with each other, I'm taking it to another level. My dad even playfully teases us, suggesting we get a room because we're constantly engaged in some form of public display of affection. Like I mentioned earlier, I won't delve into details, but I want to clarify how things unfolded with my coworker. I was chosen to join a special work team at my company. This project was a significant venture for the company and held great importance for our shareholders. Working on this assignment was satisfying but incredibly demanding and stressful. To the extent that one of our team members, a woman, experienced a nervous breakdown. Most of our work on the project was done remotely, but we did have 3 in-person team meetings along the way. As we neared the project's completion, something went wrong with the part I was responsible for. This required me to spend a week at one of our regional offices to fix the issue. Initially, 3 of us were scheduled to go, but at the last minute, the woman I mentioned, who had the nervous breakdown, had to cancel for obvious reasons. This left me and another coworker, whom I'll call Percy, to tackle the problem and ensure the project met its deadline. We were on a tight schedule and worked continuously from 7 a.m. to well past 10 p.m. for the first 2 nights, spending every available moment together. We worked together in the office and ordered food for both lunch and dinner. I was extremely stressed, and I felt like I was about to have a nervous breakdown as well. Thankfully, by 4 p.m. on Wednesday, we managed to solve the problem. To celebrate, we went to a nice restaurant and had a bit too much to drink. After returning to the hotel, one thing led to another, and I cheated on my husband. It was a spontaneous, thoughtless action. At first, I didn't have any negative feelings about it because I somehow justified it due to our hard work. So, the next night, Percy and I repeated what we did the night before. However, after being together on Thursday, the harsh reality of our actions hit me, and then Percy. We quickly regretted what we had done. Percy knew I was happily married, and I knew he was engaged to be married. We decided right then and there to forget about it as if it never happened. We were also worried that if news of this affair ever got out within our company, it could damage our reputations and potentially jeopardize our jobs, since it occurred during a company-paid business trip. We went our separate ways that night and agreed not to speak or communicate unless absolutely necessary. It wouldn't be too difficult since the project we worked on was a unique situation, and we lived on opposite sides of the country, making it unlikely for us to cross paths again. We ended things that night, or so I thought. On the flight back home, I felt fine at first, but then I started feeling anxious when I thought about meeting Deegan at the airport. I managed to hold myself together until I reached the pickup area and saw him waiting there, wearing a big smile. As soon as I laid eyes on him, I burst into tears, and we hugged and kissed each other repeatedly, holding on tightly. We were locked in that embrace for so long that an airport police officer approached us, tapping on the window and signaling us to clear the pickup lane. Deegan asked me what was wrong, and I explained that I had been under immense stress and missed him so much that I couldn't help but break down when I saw him. He understood, And that night we shared a beautiful and passionate night together. Since I returned from the trip, I've been taking extra care of him. He's enjoying the attention and deserves it. But inside, I'm suffering. Guilt is eating away at my mind, and it's getting worse by the day. I struggle with sleep and appetite, and it's affecting my work. All I want is to be close to my husband and show him how much I love him. I even have recurring nightmares about him discovering the affair and leaving me. Last week, we decided to try to conceive a child, which has heightened my emotions about everything. I keep thinking that I don't deserve him, or that he deserves someone better. I don't believe I can continue like this for another week. No one knows about the affair except for Percy and me. My situation gets even tougher because I have nobody to confide in. I sense my inner conscience urging me to be truthful and tell Deegan about my actions, but I'm terrified that it will cost me our relationship. I understand that if I confess, it will devastate him, and he might not see me the same way again. However, I believe he might eventually forgive me, given his deep love for me and his naturally kind and caring nature. So here's my dilemma. Should I disclose my meaningless affair from 2 months ago to my husband, or should I stay silent and make amends in other ways? I'd really appreciate hearing from those of you who faced a similar situation and how you handled it. Please be honest and share both the positive and negative outcomes. First update, 32 days after my initial post. I want to express my gratitude to all of you for your heartfelt responses. I've carefully read each one and value your willingness to share your personal experiences. After much contemplation and 3 counseling sessions with an excellent therapist, I've decided to tell my husband. It's going to be incredibly tough for me, and it will undoubtedly devastate him. But it's something I have to do. To prepare for this, I've created a detailed timeline of the affair, which wasn't difficult since it was purely physical and lasted less than 24 hours with no emotional involvement. My therapist has also provided me with some helpful articles on how to support a spouse dealing with infidelity, specifically what actions to avoid. I'm mentally prepared for the possibility that he might need some time apart from me. Based on what I've learned, this reaction is entirely normal, although I will be saddened if he chooses to react that way. As I mentioned earlier, my husband is an affectionate and caring man. He's generous and protective, so I don't anticipate him responding in that manner to this news. Instead, I believe he will be hurt and disappointed by my actions. I'm mentally prepared for a range of responses. Keep your fingers crossed for me. 13 months after my previous update. Hello everyone! It's been quite some time since I last posted here. Many of you have reached out, inquiring about the progress of my situation. I want to express my gratitude for your interest and concern. I intended to provide an update earlier, but life got pretty hectic, and I simply didn't have the time or energy. Things have finally started to settle down for me recently, so here I am. I'll continue where I left off. If you recall, I was about to confess to my husband about the short-lived affair I had with a coworker. My plan was to have that conversation on a Saturday morning, and I followed through with it. I ensured that we'd both be present that morning because we had plans for the afternoon, and I wanted to talk without interruptions. On the morning of the confession, I was a bundle of nerves, and I almost backed out of it. Looking back now, I wish I had. I prepared Deegan's favorite breakfast, and after we ate, I disclosed the affair to him. He listened attentively as I spoke, without uttering a word. When I finished, he gazed at me as if he were peering right through me. Then, he excused himself and retreated to the office, closing the door behind him. I approached the door and attempted to turn the handle, but it was locked. I spoke to him through the door, reiterating how sorry I was and expressing my love for him. I informed him that I'd be waiting in the living room when he was ready to talk. Based on what I had read in articles, it suggested that those who have strayed should give the betrayed partner plenty of space, so that's precisely what I did. After a few minutes, I thought I heard him talking to someone, so I quietly went back to the door to see if I could make out the conversation. Unfortunately, I couldn't, so I returned to the living room. Then, I received a call from my mom, which I let go to voicemail because I didn't have the time to talk to her. About 10 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. When I looked out, I saw my parents standing there, I opened the door and was about to suggest they come back later because Deegan and I were in the middle of a private discussion. However, my mom mentioned that Deegan had called them and confessed everything. I couldn't believe it and was left speechless. My dad asked if it was true, and I asked, "True about what?" My dad inquired, "Did you have an affair with one of your co-workers?" I admitted to it and started crying. My mom asked how I could do such a thing. Before I could respond, Deegan emerged from the office and began conversing with my parents, completely ignoring me and referring to me in the third person. He requested that my dad take me away from there as he wasn't in a good state of mind. I continued to try to communicate with him, but he kept ignoring me, focusing solely on my parents as though I were invisible. Desperate for his attention, I approached him and hugged him. Though he didn't push me away, he didn't hug me back either. After I let go of him, he returned to the office and locked the door. My parents began asking me questions about the affair, which upset me, and I ran into the bedroom. My mom followed me in, and we had a conversation for a while, and then she helped me pack a few things. Before leaving, I spoke to Deegan through the door, expressing my love for him and stating that I would stay away until he was ready to talk. I informed him that I was heading to my parents' house and would remain there as long as he needed. I didn't receive any communication from him for the rest of the day. I attempted to contact him several times, but he didn't respond. In my final text, I mentioned that I was coming over because I was worried about him. He replied and requested that I give him some space. I spent the entire day crying and repeatedly asking myself how something like this could happen. When I woke up on Sunday morning, my parents were sitting at the table, drinking coffee with sad expressions on their faces. I thought they were upset about my actions, but there was more to it. My dad informed me that Deegan had come over earlier that morning. I was excited and inquired if they had spoken to him. My dad replied, "No, we didn't see him." I then asked how they knew he was there. My dad explained that it was because he had left my car in the driveway, filled with all my belongings. Upon hearing this, I simply said, "What?" and rushed out to the driveway, where I saw my SUV parked and packed to the brim with trash bags. Seeing that, I broke down and fell to the ground, crying. I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. I told my parents that I needed to go to my house to speak with Deegan. Upon my arrival, he was at home but didn't answer the door. I attempted to unlock the doors using my keys, but the internal deadbolts were engaged, and I couldn't gain access. My next thought was to enter through the garage, but when I checked my visor, I realized Deegan had taken the remote. My idea was to enter through the garage keypad, but he had changed the code, effectively locking me out of my own house. Given the early hour on a Sunday morning, I didn't want to disturb the neighbors, so I started texting him. Initially, I was polite, but when he didn't respond, I sent a text expressing that it was my place too, and he couldn't just lock me out. His response was simply, "Sue me." I couldn't believe that the man I had once loved deeply and who had been kind and caring was treating me this way. I knew I deserved consequences, but not like this. At the very least, I expected him to be civil and not behave like someone irrational. Ultimately, I returned to my parents' house, locked myself in my old room, and spent most of the day in tears, utterly bewildered by the events of the past 24 hours. Throughout the day, I continued my attempts to contact Deegan, but he remained unresponsive. On Monday morning, I contacted my boss and requested 3 days off to address the situation. I returned to the house on Monday morning and managed to gain entry. Deegan was not there, and when I entered our bedroom, I noticed that all of his clothes were gone. It was when I entered the office that I saw something that shattered me. I discovered our wedding album cover beside the shredder, and Deegan had removed all the pictures and shredded them. I couldn't believe it. As I walked around the house, I noticed that all the pictures of us had disappeared. Upon further searching, I found the empty frames, and it became clear that he had shredded those as well. I felt deeply saddened and couldn't comprehend what was unfolding. I decided to call Deegan's workplace and spoke with the receptionist. I inquired if I could speak with him, and she informed me that he wouldn't be in the office for the remainder of the week as he had taken the week off. I then reached out to my mother-in-law. She picked up the call and mentioned that Deegan had already informed her and my father-in-law about everything. I asked if she knew his whereabouts, and she confirmed that she did, but declined to tell me and abruptly ended the conversation. I felt hurt by this situation as I had a close relationship with my in-laws. On Wednesday of that week, I started receiving calls from Percy. I chose to ignore all his calls and sent them to voicemail. Afterward, when I listened to his messages, he was urgently requesting me to call him as soon as possible. Finally, in his last message, he mentioned that Deegan had somehow contacted his fiancée and disclosed everything about the two of us. Upon hearing this, I called Percy, and he was angry. He reminded me that we had promised not to disclose anything to anyone. I acknowledged this and admitted that I should have informed him before speaking to my husband, but I hadn't anticipated his reaction. Percy then revealed that he had told his fiancée that my husband was lying and that nothing had occurred. He informed me that she intended to call me, and he insisted that I tell her the same story. I informed him that I couldn't comply with that request, and he began pleading with me. Once I reiterated my refusal to lie, he started verbally attacking me, using hurtful words and insults. He wouldn't stop, so I decided to end the call by hanging up on him and blocking his number. Shortly after, I received a call from his fiancée, and I disclosed everything to her. She remained silent as I recounted the events, and when I finished, she abruptly hung up. However, the ordeal didn't conclude there. When I returned to work the next day, I was summoned to the office of the HR director, who happened to be a friend of mine. Initially, I didn't suspect anything amiss, but upon arriving, I noticed the HR manager and the director of security were also present. I had a feeling I might be in trouble. They asked me to take a seat and mentioned that they had some questions for me. They informed me that they had been contacted by someone alleging that Percy and I had engaged in an affair during company time and had utilized company resources. My heart sank, and I started to cry. I then proceeded to confess what had occurred, but clarified that nothing had happened during official work hours. The HR director explained that when salaried employees travel for business, the entire trip is considered work time. She went on to clarify that the hotel room is regarded as a company resource since it was paid for by the company. They proceeded to inquire about the second night when Percy and I were together. They asked if I had dinner with Percy that evening, and I reluctantly admitted that I had. They followed up by asking if I had consumed wine, to which I replied affirmatively, disclosing that I had 2 glasses. Next, they inquired if I had bought the wine, and I responded that I hadn't. Percy had made the purchase. The HR director pointed out that this violated company policy because employees are not allowed to use another employee's card for food or drinks. As a result, I received a final written warning for these infractions, while Percy faced termination. To clarify, there was no preferential treatment due to my gender. Percy would have faced the same consequences if those were the only issues. But unfortunately for him, there was more to his situation. Percy got terminated because he extended his stay by an extra day without a legitimate business reason and charged the entire expense, including the flight change fee, hotel stay, and all his meals, which included the 2 bottles of wine. He extended his stay solely to be with me the following evening. I feel deeply remorseful about what happened to Percy. He was an outstanding employee with a promising future. But now he's unemployed, and his fiancée left him, all because of my actions. As for me, any aspirations of getting a promotion in the aftermath of this incident seem unlikely. To add to the turmoil, the following Monday at work, Deegan had divorce papers served to me at the reception desk. The receptionist called to inform me that there was a delivery up front. As I arrived there, a man was waiting with a box of flowers. I hoped they were a gift from Deegan, and indeed they were. However, after I signed for the package, the man handed me the flowers and then delivered the divorce papers, stating, "Mrs. Jenny, you have officially been served with divorce papers." My world fell apart at that moment, and I couldn't hold back my tears. I had to leave the office and decided to take the rest of the week off. Over the next 7 months, I made every effort to salvage my marriage, but Deegan refused to engage with me at all. In fact, he hasn't uttered a single word to me since I confessed. Our divorce has now been finalized, but I'm still struggling emotionally. I cherish and miss the kind man he used to be before my affair, but I understand that person no longer exists. I acknowledge that I deserve to face consequences for my actions, but I never anticipated Deacon's reaction. I knew there was a slim chance that my confession could end our relationship, but I believed that likelihood was exceedingly rare. I want to conclude with a message for my husband. Babe, if you ever come across this, I want you to know that I am genuinely sorry and will love you eternally. Alright, that was a fun story. Now let's move on to another exciting one. Stay tuned and let's dive in. I'm 36 years old, and my wife is 38. We first crossed paths when I was in my third year of college, and she was in her fourth. Since that day, we've been together. After dating for 3 years, we made the decision to move in together. Then, after 3 more years, we tied the knot. 2 years after that, our happiness grew when my wife became pregnant, and we welcomed our daughter into the world. Like any typical family, we had our fair share of domestic disagreements, but we always managed to reconcile swiftly, sometimes even in the middle of an argument. In general, we were a traditional family. Once I completed my education, I embarked on my career journey, working hard to climb the corporate ladder. Eventually, I earned enough to afford a spacious 4-room apartment. We invested significantly in renovating it and happily settled into our new home. My wife, after her maternity leave, resumed her career, which went quite smoothly. She secured a good position and started earning a decent income. With our combined earnings, we achieved financial prosperity. Over time, we acquired everything we needed, including a new apartment for our growing daughter, luxurious cars, and all the comforts one could desire. Life felt abundant. I held deep love for my wife and remained faithful to her throughout our marriage. I wasn't a heavy drinker, but occasionally I'd enjoy a glass of wine with dinner. I recently gave up smoking. We always planned our vacations together, and I developed a passion for diving and skiing. While my wife chose not to dive due to fear, she took up skiing. Our lives revolved around working, earning money, and savoring the rewards of our hard work. My wife's job was related to international business, often involving meetings with colleagues from abroad for negotiations. Gradually, I began to notice that her interactions with these colleagues appeared to be longer than before. While it initially piqued my curiosity, I didn't pay much attention to it at first. Another notable change was her receiving Snapchat messages in the evenings. Oddly, when her foreign colleagues were around, these messages stopped coming. A couple of times I checked her phone after she had fallen asleep, but all the messages had been deleted. I observed that the last message consistently arrived around 7 p.m., even though her phone received notifications after she had already gone to bed. In the end, suspicion completely consumed me. One evening she arrived home late, around 10 p.m., and I, perhaps foolishly, jokingly inquired if she had bid farewell to her secret admirer. I witnessed a fear in her eyes like never before. However, once she realized I was teasing, she smiled and dismissed it, calling me a fool. Furthermore, she occasionally traveled abroad to visit her colleagues in return. When my suspicions peaked, I reached a breaking point. I resorted to installing spyware on her phone, enabling remote control through SMS or my personal account. This software could capture audio from her surroundings, take pictures with the camera, and send all the data to my personal account. One day she embarked on another business trip, and in the evening, after spending time with our daughter, assisting her with homework, and putting her to bed by 10 p.m., I accessed the spyware account and instructed it to record her phone's surroundings for 10 minutes. A few minutes later, a recording popped up on my account, and upon listening, I heard my wife's voice in a room with a man. They conversed in English, and I comprehended every word. Their discussion revolved around ordinary life matters, accompanied by laughter. I realized they were alone in that room. Then, a sudden clinking of glasses amid their laughter sent my heart racing. At that instant, I sent another command to record for an additional 20 minutes and capture an image of the surroundings. Shockingly, the photo came out as a dark square, indicating the phone was placed with the camera facing down. Swiftly, I directed the program to snap a picture using the front camera. The resulting photo showed the phone resting on the bedside table in the room, partially capturing the bed's headboard and an adjacent wall lamp. 15 minutes later, another recording emerged, sending shivers down my spine. As I played it, their laughter and conversation filled my ears once more. I found myself in a state of disbelief and shock, as if my entire world were collapsing right before my eyes. Stunned, I poured myself a drink and instructed the program to record for an additional 4 hours, during which I drowned my sorrows in alcohol. The following morning, Thursday, I was utterly shattered. As it was time for my daughter to go to school, I informed her that she didn't need to attend classes that day. I also notified my boss that I would be taking a couple of personal days until Monday. My wife's expected return was on Sunday, so I settled down and began listening to the 4-hour recording. However, I could only bear to listen for 40 minutes because at that moment I unmistakably heard the sounds of my wife's pleasure, the same sounds I had known for over 13 years. It felt like a sharp knife had pierced my heart, causing both emotional and physical anguish. Stunned and overwhelmed, I hurried to the bathroom, feeling nauseous. I couldn't tell if it was a hangover or the current situation causing it. I stood under a freezing shower for 20 minutes, desperately seeking relief. Afterward, I took our daughter to visit her grandparents, promising to explain everything later, and then returned home alone. During lunch, my wife called and genuinely inquired about my well-being. I stood there in silence, unable to utter a word, feigning a poor connection. I informed her that I wasn't feeling well and would stay home for a few days, entrusting our daughter to her grandmother's care. That day felt like the most agonizing of my life. I experienced a personal hell, feeling utterly lost and unsure of how to proceed. My mind was consumed by a constant buzzing that drowned out my own thoughts. I sat on the couch and wept like a child, overwhelmed by waves of anger and apathy. The more I let my emotions out, the more they seemed to numb me. By the day's end, I was emotionally drained. In the evening, I returned to the spyware account and began giving commands to the phone. I received photos, some taken from her bag and others from the table. There were recordings of her performances in restaurants with numerous voices, presumably her colleagues. Then, as the evening progressed, I stumbled upon something different. The phone was once again on the bedside table, capturing her voice along with someone else's. However, this time there were no intimate sounds. Unable to endure it any longer, I called her. After 4 rings, she answered, noticeably panting. I inquired about her heavy breathing, and she explained that the hotel elevator had broken down, forcing her to climb the stairs to her room. We talked for a while, and I did my best to maintain a calm and steady voice. Eventually, I mentioned that I was going to bed, wished her good night, hung up, and swiftly sent a command to the spy program, requesting a rapid series of pictures using the front camera. Her mistake occurred right then. After our call, she placed the phone not on the bedside table but on the bed beside her. As a result, the front-facing camera started capturing slightly tilted but candid photos. These images revealed her sitting astride someone else with her head thrown back. Following that, there was a recording that captured unmistakable sounds, instantly exposing her actions. That was the final straw for me, and I documented these notes and materials. At that point, she had become a complete stranger to me. From that moment on, I refrained from further investigation until Sunday because everything had become painfully clear. I was pondering my next steps. Should I pursue a divorce? What about our 6-year-old daughter? On Sunday, late at night, she returned home, eager to kiss me. I pulled away, telling her I was still unwell. I had an urge to confront her and let my anger out. Instead, I retreated to the office and slept on the sofa. The following morning, I woke up before her, couldn't bear to be around her any longer, and headed to work. I endured the day mechanically, then approached my boss and urgently requested a week's vacation. I saved all the proof on a flash drive and then phoned my wife. I told her I had to go on a 1-day business trip, but asked her not to take our daughter away from her grandmother because I had a surprise planned. That night, when I returned home, I packed my bag quickly. She helped me pack, acting politely and innocently. However, her insincerity made me angry. I took my bag, left the USB drive on the bedroom nightstand, and called a taxi to our second apartment, the one set aside for our daughter. Once there, I called a friend and suggested going abroad for a few days. He agreed, and we hastily booked tickets for an early morning flight to Munich. It was in Munich that I confessed everything to him. We explored the city, socialized with other women, and to be honest, I no longer had any feelings for my wife. I ignored her calls and only messaged her to insert the USB drive into my laptop. After about 30 minutes, my phone started ringing non-stop, and I received numerous messages. But I didn't care anymore, so I turned off my phone. We continued our adventures in Munich for 3 more days before I flew back home on Saturday. When I returned, I turned on my phone, and it took me 5 minutes to go through a bunch of messages from my wife. However, I chose not to read them because I was afraid of getting confused before going into the apartment. When I entered, it was oddly quiet inside. I quietly placed my bag down, removed my shoes, and was about to wash my hands when she emerged from the bedroom. Oh my goodness! I had never seen her looking so disheveled and swollen, with tears streaming down her face. She dropped to her knees, trying to explain something incoherently amidst her sobs and tears. I maintained a stoic expression, urging her not to make a scene. Then, in a composed manner, I asked her about our next steps. She begged me for forgiveness, once again drowning in tears and mucus. She admitted she had made a terrible mistake, claiming she didn't understand how things had come to this point. She even started calling herself names and so on. But, I realized that I no longer felt sympathy or anger toward her. She cried out that she loved me and had always loved only me, and that all of this had happened because she had been foolish and realized during my absence that she had ruined our relationship. But as they say, revenge is best served cold. I told her that we were no longer husband and wife, just mom and dad for our daughter. We would pretend everything was okay between us, but I would live my life, and she could live hers. She was no longer the only one in my life. She was just my partner in raising our child. Maybe someday I'll change my mind, but for now, the thought of being intimate with her makes me sick. By the way, I told her where I had been and what I had been doing. She said she understood everything and was willing to endure whatever it took. Well, no one forced her to speak. As a result, we now share the same apartment. Although, to be honest, I've already purchased another one for myself and put it in my father's name to avoid property disputes. I spend most of my time sleeping in the office, although occasionally I sleep in the bedroom for my daughter's sake. There have been a few times when my wife tried to hug me when we shared a bed, but I rejected her firmly. It's been 3 months since we were intimate. She hasn't confided in her parents. Only her father knows about my situation. We agreed to take a family vacation once a year for a week, but now we'd have separate beds. I often hang out with friends and have made new acquaintances, including some attractive women. Sometimes I wonder when she'll reach a breaking point and leave or file for divorce, but she hasn't yet. I frequently catch her staring at me like a scared cat. But honestly, I don't care. Even though I see her making efforts, I find satisfaction in her pain. Recently, I provocatively placed a pack of rubbers on my office desk to taunt her. Despite her reaction, she entered the office to say something, noticed the rubbers on the table, and hurried out, probably in tears. She still goes to work, but she doesn't stay late anymore. Although I don't really keep tabs on her. At some point, she tried to explain to me that she had severed all non-business ties with another man. It seems she'll still need to communicate with him for work-related matters, but she swears she doesn't approach him now. By the way, that guy also has a family. I told her that her relationships with sexual partners are none of my concern, and she's free to do as she pleases. She doesn't need to inform me about her intimate encounters. I also stay out late sometimes now, leaving when my daughter goes to bed on Friday nights, for example. Naturally, I don't hold back when it comes to my desires. If I want sex, it happens. In the morning, I go to the office to sleep, or to the bedroom if she's not there anymore. There haven't been any changes in our daily routine at home. I continue to do the grocery shopping, and I enjoy cooking. We still have a housekeeper for cleaning, so that aspect remains the same. I've been covering the rent for the apartment, and I still am. I'm not concerned about how or if she's spending her money. Our communication is limited to our daughter or her parents when they visit, although I have a feeling that if I were to tell my mother-in-law, she might confront her right in front of me. I have a good relationship with my mother-in-law. She's a smart woman who values family strongly. This is probably one reason why my wife doesn't want to leave. It seems like she's afraid of her mom because she knows her mother would ask, "What's going on?" And I won't lie. In general, I tease my wife as much as I can, and I find enjoyment in it. Yes, maybe I've become somewhat of a monster now, but she's the one who brought this out in me. And you know what surprises me? Her persistence and patience. It's like a challenge to me. I wonder how much more she can endure. And please don't start with the whole, "She's the mother of your child, blah, blah, blah." She didn't care much about that when she was involved with that guy. For half a year, she was going on business trips or having affairs in this city without thinking about our daughter or her husband. No comment. Whenever I feel like I might soften, I remember that day and what I felt, and it strengthens my resolve. I become unyielding again. So this is how I'm living now. Our daughter is doing well. We're good parents, and I still help her with her schoolwork in the evenings. Our mutual friends are unaware of our situation. Maybe when I get tired of tormenting her or decide enough is enough, I'll switch off my hostile mode and have a conversation with her. But not right now. Not now. I'm a 42-year-old guy and she's a 37-year-old woman. Our paths crossed at work. I'm a sound engineer at a football stadium, and she applied for a stadium maintenance and cleaning job one summer. I noticed her during a game when the stadium manager was showing the new employees around. She stood out from the rest, wearing expensive clothes, owning a fancy phone, and driving a Range Rover that must have cost a fortune. And let me tell you, she was drop-dead gorgeous. I was like, whoa, where's she been all this time? She didn't seem like someone who needed to work, but there she was. I couldn't take my eyes off her for a whole month, but didn't know how to approach her. She had this sadness in her eyes and kept to herself mostly. I tried getting some info about her from Stan, the stadium manager, who happened to be a childhood friend of mine. But it turned out no one really knew much about her or her story. All I got was that she was from Wisconsin, 34 years old, and came from a wealthy background. But that didn't matter to me at all. Stan suggested I should just talk to her if I wanted to know more. He said she often worked overtime cleaning the stadium after games, and there was still an opening for that shift, so he let me sign up. And that's exactly what I did. After the games that week, I joined the cleaning crew to help clean up the stadium, and guess who showed up too? Yep, she did. I spent an hour trying to tidy up everywhere except where she was standing, and I must have looked like a total goofball, making awkward eye contact. But you know what? She smiled and waved at me, and man, that smile was something else. It was the first time I had seen her smile, and it was absolutely beautiful. Even though I felt super awkward, that smile gave me the courage to approach her. She asked if I could help with her trash bag, and of course, I said yes. We didn't talk much that day, but I managed to get her name. Let's call her Karen. After that, we ran into each other from time to time during the after-game cleanups, and we'd help each other out. Our conversations mostly revolved around me because whenever I tried to ask personal questions, she'd dodge them. I figured it was the setting that made her uncomfortable, so I decided to engineer more chances to see her outside of work. Finally, one Saturday after the cleanups, she had car troubles and I offered to give her a ride. At first, she declined, saying she'd wait for a taxi. But when I drove out of the premise and saw her still waiting, we both laughed. That's when I offered her a ride again, and this time, she accepted. The car ride home was one of those magical moments I'll treasure forever. The sun was setting, and Michael Bublé's Call Me Irresponsible was playing loudly on the speakers. We were both singing along and having a blast. It was like she transformed from this quiet, mysterious person to someone radiant and carefree. Her hair flowed in the wind, and her eyes sparkled. I fell head over heels for her right then and there. When I dropped her off, she thanked me for the ride, and I mustered up the courage to ask her out on a date. She looked at me for what felt like an eternity and then smiled and said yes. She said yes as a way of showing appreciation for the ride and how nice I had been to her. We went out for sushi a few days later, and the date started off a bit awkward. But after a couple of drinks, we both loosened up and started talking more. Turns out, we had a lot in common, like our love for seafood and the same type of wine. I asked her why she didn't talk much about herself, and she said she just didn't feel like it most of the time. It turned out that Karen's dad had a successful steel factory in Wisconsin. She grew up as an only child in a Jewish family, and it wasn't always the most fun experience for her, given the circumstances. Her dad was Jewish, but her mom had Jewish ancestry but wasn't. Her dad wasn't pleased with the guys she brought home so far. He disowned her twice and cut her off completely. That's why she needed a job at the stadium so she wouldn't rely on him for money. She had dated a bunch of different guys in the past, and they were all a mix of characters, from pills dealers to ex-convicts to crazy people. I could see why her dad didn't approve. She once told me she had a thing for broken and damaged people, and she liked living dangerously. I couldn't quite understand why someone like her would want to be with those kinds of people. But that night we spent together ended well, and it was clear she liked me. At that time, she had just come out of a relationship with an offensive pills dealer, but her dad made her leave him. She didn't want to leave, so he cut her off. Eventually, she left him when the police found hard pills in her car, which her boyfriend had left there during one of his runs. Because of that, she lost her nursing license and broke up with him. For the next 6 months, she sent me mixed signals, sometimes pulling me close and other times pushing me away. It left me confused for a while, but I didn't lose hope. We flirted for over a year before I saw enough positive response to pursue her more seriously. She asked me to help her pack up her things for the move to a place not too far from mine. She was struggling with rent and cash, so she had to sell her Range Rover to afford the new place. I suggested she should try to make up with her dad, and she agreed, but on one condition. I had to come along to a family function. We talked in the parking lot, and she gave me a hug that felt incredible. I wanted more of that kind of contact, and she seemed to feel the same way. However, she kept herself distant for the next week, and our courtship seemed to take forever. After a few months, she invited me to go with her to Wisconsin for a family party. The drive was long, but we made it there. She introduced me to her mom and dad as her boyfriend, which surprised me, but I didn't mind. Her dad and I got along pretty well. He was a bit overprotective, but not too bad. We both bonded over being die-hard Met fans, which gave us a lot to talk about. I guess he was just relieved that I wasn't some pills dealer or ex-convict. We respected each other, and when he asked about my plans for his daughter, I smiled and said I intended to marry her. He was pleased with my answer. The dinner went well, and we drove back home. While in the car, she casually remarked, "I guess we're going out now," and I took the opportunity to officially ask her out. She kissed me and said yes. We started dating, and a few months later, I moved in with her. Our life together was perfect, and we were really happy. A year later, I proposed, and we got married at a small country club in Wisconsin. The following years were pure bliss. She worked hard to get her nursing license reinstated, and after some struggles, she succeeded. We had discussed starting a family, and life seemed great. However, as time went on, we started facing issues, especially related to money. She had grown up in a privileged environment, and though she claimed money wasn't important when we were dating, her spending habits said otherwise. She constantly bought expensive branded bags, and her parents always seemed to need money from her. It bothered me, and I tried talking to them about it. Her dad understood where I was coming from, but her mom didn't quite get it. We had a major fight when I confronted her parents about giving her money, and she got furious, accusing me of embarrassing her. From there, things went downhill as other bad habits started showing up. She became irresponsible, partying and staying out late like a college girl, drinking and having a blast whenever she could. Her dad's influence at the hospital where she worked gave her special treatment, so she showed up whenever she pleased. The chief nursing officer had complained about her countless times, warning that if she kept it up, she'd be fired. We fought a lot about her behavior. I tried to tell her that she was now a wife and soon to be a mother, and she needed to be responsible, but she'd just tell me to go to hell and that she was only accountable to herself. Eventually she did get fired, but it didn't seem to bother her at all. Her mom continued to spoil her, ignoring everything I said, claiming that Karen was delicate and not used to suffering, and I couldn't understand that. Some days she'd come home late, and on one occasion she didn't come home at all. I had to go out at 3 a.m. to look for her, and her friends were surprised she wasn't home, as they had put her in a cab before leaving. Turns out she hailed a cab and went back to the club after her friends left, wanting to continue partying. When I got to the club, I saw her in the parking lot with a big guy in an inappropriate situation, and it drove me crazy with anger. I rushed at him, and we ended up in a scuffle, exchanging a few blows until the club security intervened. Thank goodness they did, because the guy had a knife, and he could have seriously hurt me with it. I got a few injuries in the process. Karen just watched and cried, begging us to stop. When we got home, I was furious and shaken. I couldn't handle the first aid for my wounds. I wanted her to leave, but she begged and promised to change. The sight of blood and injury seemed to get to her, and she felt remorseful and guilty. She stayed with me the whole week, and we had long talks. I suggested she see a therapist or counselor to work through her issues, and she agreed. She had a tough childhood and teenage years, neglected by her parents who only showered her with gifts and money instead of their time, so she ended up with the wrong crowd. Hanging out with pills dealers and obsessions had taken its toll on her. I took her to her first therapy session, and she felt better after talking to the therapist. I went with her to 3 more therapy sessions, and overall her mood improved, and she seemed to have more control now. I talked to her parents about her situation and what happened at the club the other day, and the fact that she started seeing a therapist. Her mom blamed everything on me, but her dad understood. She kept improving, quit smoking, came home early, and was thinking about going back to work. Things were good for a few weeks, but then she started slipping again. She'd be on her phone all day texting, and when I tried to talk to her, she'd say I was boring or annoying her. Whenever I brought up her phone use, she'd counter by saying I wanted her to stay home and go out less. We fought a lot. and I was getting fed up. One day I decided to surprise her and pick her up from her appointment. When she came out, she was holding hands and laughing with a man I'd never seen before. She introduced him as Charlie, saying they both had therapy appointments and met in therapy. During the car ride home, I asked her about holding Charlie's hand like that, and she brushed it off, saying I didn't need to worry because Charlie wasn't straight. I accepted her explanation. Things were okay for a while, but one day she went to her therapist and I left for work. While I was at work, a buddy of mine who works as a sports camera operator called me and asked about Karen. He seemed a bit odd and asked where she was. I told him she was at her therapist's office. He said he had a video to show me and didn't want me to freak out, but it was already too late as I was already freaking out. He sent me a video on WhatsApp. In the middle of the game, he had captured my wife in a hat, holding hands and kissing a man I recognized as Charlie. The same Charlie she claimed wasn't straight. I was so furious. And all I remember is my buddy trying to calm me down. As soon as I finished work, I rushed to the therapist's office. Even though her session wasn't over for another hour, I called her cell but she didn't pick up. The therapist informed me that Karen hadn't been there for a while and she had been trying to contact me but couldn't reach me on my new line. However, I hadn't changed my phone number. Karen had lied, claiming I lost my phone and had to change lines, and she gave the therapist the wrong number. I got back home, seething with anger, and waited for her. When she finally returned, I asked where she had been, and she said she was at therapy. I questioned why she didn't pick up her cell, and she claimed phones weren't allowed during therapy sessions. Clever excuse, I thought. I didn't let on that I had been at her therapist's office or mentioned the video. I wanted her to come clean on her own, so I asked if there was anything she wanted to tell me. She looked confused and denied anything was wrong. For days, I observed her from a distance as she went out every day, supposedly hanging out with gay Charlie and her friends or attending therapy sessions. Little did I know she was actually fooling around with Charlie behind my back. The thought infuriated me, and I couldn't believe she believed I was so naive. I hoped she would eventually confess and tell me the truth, but the weeks dragged on, and she remained silent. We didn't even talk to each other anymore. Whenever her parents called, she put on a fake happy act, pretending to be a loving wife so they would keep sending her money. She even invited Charlie over, with him still playing the idiotic charade of being gay. I lost my self-assurance as a man and sank into depression. The pain was unbearable and I couldn't muster the courage to confront her. Things continued like this until the end of the year. On New Year's Day, I asked her again if she had anything to confess, but her response remained the same. The family Passover dinner was approaching in April, and I had given her plenty of time to come clean and tell me the truth. In the meantime, I hired a private investigator to gather all the evidence I needed for what I was about to do. Then, I consulted a lawyer and had him prepare the divorce papers. The PI spent weeks collecting photos and videos of them together, holding hands in public, entering their favorite hotel, and even making out in a car. I compiled all the evidence on a flash drive. On the first day of Passover, her family gathered for a big dinner, or Seder, as it's known in Judaism. Everyone came together to eat, exchange gifts, and enjoy each other's company. We arrived late, and an argument erupted over her insistence that I wear an expensive suit she had bought for me. I tried to reason that my regular suits were just fine, but she accused me of acting weird and being annoying. I struggled to keep my composure. She claimed I would embarrass her in front of her family and especially her mother. Finally, we arrived at the dinner, and after prayers and the meal, we began the tradition of exchanging gifts among the adults. Gathering in the living room, everyone gathered at the Passover dinner, and even Charlie was there, pretending to be clueless and not straight. When it was my turn to give out gifts, I got her dad a Tom Seaver jersey, knowing he'd love it. For her mom, I chose a bottle of wine, which she might not have liked, but she smiled graciously. And for Karen, I handed over a small box containing the flash drive with all the evidence. She seemed puzzled and gave me a strange look, but I told her it held all the reasons why I loved her and some of our best memories together. The family found it cute, but Karen rolled her eyes at me. I suggested she play it on the TV for everyone, and they all agreed. So she plugged the flash drive into the TV's USB port, and the video started playing. As the pictures began to reveal the truth, everyone was silent. Karen didn't move, and tears started streaming down her face. Charlie's expression was priceless. Infidelity was taken seriously in her Orthodox Jewish family, and I genuinely felt sorry for her dad. I got up, approached him, and personally apologized for everything, then placed the divorce papers on the table, telling Karen that I needed them signed. Both Karen and her mom went on their knees, pleading and crying. But I stood my ground. I had given her ample time to come clean, and her apologies now seemed hollow since she was only remorseful because she got caught. I also went to her dad and offered my apologies again, feeling sympathy for him, embarrassed by his daughter's actions. I sat in the car and tears streamed down my face. Eventually, I gathered myself, went back home, packed up all my belongings and left. The divorce was finalized a few months later, and her family completely cut ties with her. You know how serious they are about infidelity in Orthodox Jewish communities. Her mother occasionally texts me, calling me a monster for supposedly ruining her daughter's life. But I've moved on and found happiness. Sometimes I miss her, but she's the one who caused all this pain between us. The last I heard, she had found a job at a 9-11 and was pregnant with a crackhead. It's a shame how her life has turned out. Despite everything, I still keep in touch with her dad. We've become good friends over time. Story 2. I just needed to get this off my chest because right now I feel like I have no one to talk to. Sorry if I start rambling. We're about to hit our 27th year of marriage this October. We have 2 kids. Our daughter lives with us. She recently got married and is waiting for her husband's deployment to the Air Force. Our son, on the other hand, is a Marine and lives on the opposite coast. Things have been rough for us for the past 6 months, mainly because I've been dealing with ED. To put it plainly, my wife has a high sex drive, but I can only go so far. I've tried multiple pills, experimented with toys, and tried to be creative. But for her, it's just not the same as the real thing. She started becoming more distant and even lashed out at me, saying I don't love her anymore or that I'm not attracted to her. It's tough for both of us, as I struggle with my own feelings of inadequacy because of ED, and there have been times when I turned her down for closeness because I know I can't fully satisfy her. It's a tough situation for both of us. My wife's always on social media, posting a lot. We're different in that way. I prefer reading what my friends are up to, but don't post much while she's constantly posting. Lately, she's been sharing tons of pictures of herself, and her friends shower her with compliments, calling her beautiful. I noticed this one guy all over her posts, but I figured, some guy probably has a crush on my wife, but she wouldn't engage in anything like that. In the past few months, though, my wife's been growing more distant from me, and she's been getting upset, saying I'm not giving her enough attention. With everything going on with COVID, she's not working. But I'm working full-time from home. I thought maybe it was just the stress getting to her, so I tried to make an effort to be there for her even more. I'd come out of my office throughout the day to talk to her, but it seemed like she was pushing me away, shutting me down. Then we had a massive argument, and she laid out all the things she's unhappy about. She said I'm not giving her what she needs. Closeness, intimacy. Our current bed life has become a big problem for her, and she's craving something that no longer works for me. It's been tough. I feel terrible, but I don't know what else to do. So, in an attempt to figure out where things went wrong, 2 nights ago, we were talking, and her phone buzzed. I was right there, and it was a Facebook message from some guy. You know, the same guy who's been all over her Facebook, engaging with her, and guess what it said? Miss you, thinking about you. I was like, what the hell is this? She starts explaining that he's just an old friend from her childhood who reached out on Facebook, and they know each other's families, so it's nothing serious. But as the night went on, I started uncovering a series of lies, and it just kept getting worse. Turns out they've been talking for months, just reminiscing about family and childhood stuff. Then it escalated, and she was telling him about our marriage problems, but she swears that's as far as it went. But when I pushed her to be honest, it got even worse. They were exchanging fantasies about what they'd do to each other. She broke down, saying she was just craving sex so badly. But here's the thing. We do have closeness, but it's not the full deal. We do what we can without penetration because of my issues. Then she tells me she has to go out. She needs to think about all of this. I almost lost it and pleaded for her not to leave, but I held back. It's a mess. I thought she might be calling a friend. A girlfriend, you know? Then it hit me. What are the chances she's actually talking to that guy? So, in kind of a crap move, I went on Verizon's site and checked her phone logs. Bingo! There was a 30-minute call with a number right after she left. I got worried and started digging around to find out who it was. It was getting late and I was freaking out about why she wasn't coming back. I texted her a few times, but she didn't reply. Finally, around 2 a.m., I got a text saying she's coming home. When she got back, I asked her what she did. She told me she went to see one of her girlfriends, and I asked who she called. She said she called her girlfriend, but I knew her friend's number because our families are friends. So I told her, I know you made another call. She looked shocked, and I said, just tell the truth. That's when it all started pouring out. Throughout the night and into the morning, she finally came clean. She admitted they hadn't had sex yet, but they were planning to, and she said it was definitely going to happen. I asked her over and over if it was going to stop, if she was still committed to us. Every time I asked her, I got vague answers. "She's confused and lost," she said. At one point she promised not to talk to him, but the very next day, he reached out, and they talked for about 20 minutes. "Sorry for rambling, but I'm lost and don't know what to do. I have no one to talk to about this. It's weird that she's seen as this pillar of the community, and I'm just the quiet, hard-working husband. If people found out about the affair, they'd probably wonder what I did wrong. But maybe that doesn't matter. I just feel like I have no one to turn to. I don't even know how to end this. The pain is overwhelming. It's like a physical ache in my chest, and I feel so sick. If you've read this far, thank you. I really don't know what to do." 3 years update. During one of the darkest times in my life, I decided to share this update because something incredible happened that night, and I want to offer hope to others going through tough times. It was tough for me to write this post as it's not my usual style, but I felt like I had no one else to turn to. Then, there was a reply that said, "I've sent you a message." I responded, and that's how it all started. This woman shared her similar story, offered advice, and supported me. We got to know each other better, and our connection grew into a friendship. We went from messaging on Reddit to texting, calling, and eventually decided to meet in person. Our friends warned us to take things slow, but something just clicked between us. Before long, we knew we were in love. Fast forward 3 years, and now marriage is on the horizon. I've never been happier or more in love. It's not lost on us that our shared experience of infidelity brought us together and formed a unique bond. But this has also improved our communication skills because we both understand that we carry emotional scars. The love and sense of security I experience with this woman is beyond measure. I'm sharing this today as it has been 3 years. You can and will overcome your hardships. Happiness and love are out there. The best advice I received during that tough time was to focus on self-improvement, taking care of myself by eating right, exercising, and practicing self-care. When I worked on becoming a better version of myself, I found that happiness and joy naturally came my way. So don't give up. Keep moving forward, and good things will come your way in life. Story 3. On June 14, 2020, I discovered that my wife had been secretly drugging me for the past 8 weeks to carry out an affair. She used crushed Ambien and muscle relaxers mixed into my drink, causing me to be unconscious. Despite my large stature, 6'10" inches and 250 pounds, she managed to move me from the living room to the bedroom while I was unconscious. We had been happily married for over 9 years, but everything changed suddenly about 2 weeks after the COVID lockdowns began. Her behavior and attitude shifted, becoming verbally abusive, manipulative, and frequently gaslighting me. Eventually, she resorted to drugging me. It turned out she was having an affair with her trainer in his home garage gym. During that time, she even asked me twice about collecting life insurance in case something happened to me. After I caught her and obtained a restraining order, my mom passed away a few months later. I've attempted to share my story twice before, but it gets flagged and removed instantly. Perhaps it was too long, so I'll keep this short. Through therapy, I learned that one way to cope with the trauma is to keep a list of the things I've learned, so my suffering won't be in vain. I'm sharing it here in case it might be helpful to someone else. If you put up with certain behavior, it won't just continue, it'll get worse. Learn to distinguish between what you want and what you actually need. Don't lose your identity to please someone else. If they don't appreciate your small efforts, they won't appreciate the big ones either, and might even resent you without realizing it. Be cautious of people who try to please you at the cost of their own well-being, as they may end up resenting you for it. Insecurity often leads to dishonesty. Personal worth and integrity are crucial for a healthy relationship. Don't let yourself become bitter, deceitful, or dishonest in any relationship. Respect your own boundaries, and if someone doesn't respect them, they don't respect you. Look for a partner not just for physical attraction, but for who they are beyond that, especially when sex isn't the focus anymore. Marry someone who has something to lose if the marriage doesn't work out. Marriage is an ongoing negotiation. Sex is overrated. Effective communication is what's truly attractive. Making mistakes is part of being human, but continually making bad choices after mistakes is what defines someone as bad. Trust your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. Don't expect others to give you more than you expect from yourself. Update. I get that some folks find my words strange or insincere, and I apologize for that. It's tough to express everything concisely. I tried sharing the whole story twice, but the bot mods removed it right away, probably because it was too long. So, I'm doing my best to give a summary. I've got loads of evidence to back up my claims. If you want details, DM me. though I don't feel obligated to prove anything to anyone. Regarding the wording, somehow she managed to drag me, some people seem bothered by it. What I meant is that I'm a big guy and she drugged me multiple times, but I have no clue how she got me into bed every time. Story 4. My wife and I have been together for a solid 10 years, married for 8, and now we're raising 2 adorable kids together. She's the love of my life, and I can't picture myself with anyone else. Things started to change about 3 years into our marriage when she began showing a strong attraction to Asian characters in the shows and movies we watched together during our weekly movie nights. At first, I thought she was just kidding around, but it became evident that she was serious about it about a month ago when we were watching Chicago Med. She kept joking about wanting Dr. Choi, one of the characters, to be her doctor so he could feel her up. I laughed it off initially, but things got a bit uncomfortable when she insisted we stop watching the show after Dr. Choi got involved with another doctor. Looking back now, I've noticed that she's always been drawn to Asian men throughout our entire relationship. For the past few years, she's been obsessed with those K-pop stars, talking about how she'd rather be with guys like Eric Mun and Jimin instead of me. She even made comments about our babies not being as cute because they're not Asian. It's weird and hurtful, especially because we have a Korean friend who visits us regularly. I used to think she acted strangely around him, but I didn't take it personally until last night. As I was tidying up after dinner, my wife asked if we could have a serious talk. I was a bit hesitant, but agreed. She started by saying she felt our bed life wasn't as fulfilling as before. I was surprised and asked how I could improve things for her. That's when she suggested bringing a third person into our bedroom. I instantly knew she had someone specific in mind, despite her denials. We talked in circles for an hour, and eventually she admitted that she had been having sexual thoughts about my childhood friend and wanted me to watch them together. I was shocked and told her I didn't want to discuss it further, so I ended up sleeping in the living room that night. The next morning she took the kids to school and went to help her sister pack for her move. We haven't spoken since the previous night, and I'm feeling lost about what to do. I'm sitting in my car outside my office, writing this, unsure if I can face her at home knowing what she's been thinking. I'm considering a divorce, because she's not the woman I fell in love with anymore, and I suspect she may have already acted on her urges with my friend. I wonder if divorce is too extreme of a response for a sexual fantasy. Update. So, after I posted last night, things were still tense between my wife and me. She was busy putting the kids to bed, so I took the chance to call my friend privately. I went outside, dialed him up, and spilled the beans about everything. Turns out, a few years back, during a party with mutual friends, my wife got drunk and tried to make a move on him. She started flirting, and when he didn't respond, she went in for a kiss. He was having none of it, and left the party early. I asked him why he never told me, and he said he didn't want to mess with our marriage over something that happened when she was wasted. They never talked about it and just kept being friends like nothing happened. Now here's the kicker. That party is around the same time her strange obsession with Asian men in media began. Putting 2 and 2 together, I thanked him for opening up to me and ended the call. I stormed inside and confronted my wife about everything. I was completely disgusted with her for trying to kiss my friend and suggesting I watch them together. I didn't hold back and told her exactly how I felt and what my friend had revealed. My wife finally admitted that she wanted to open our bedroom to my friend because she had feelings for him for years and wanted to avoid cheating on me. I made it clear that she already cheated by doing what she did, and it shattered the foundation of our relationship. I told her we're getting a divorce, and nothing would change my mind. Since then, I've been staying with friends and family, and she's been bombarding me with messages on my phone. But I'm proud to say I haven't given her any attention. I still see her briefly when I stop by the house to pick up my kids during the day. They're too young to understand what's happening, and they go to a daycare school program in the summer, so I don't stay long in the house. I've been looking for a lawyer to handle the divorce proceedings and searching for an apartment in my kids' school district. I feel liberated because many of you were right. Our marriage has been dead for a long time. As for my friend, I don't know if I can look at him the same way again. We've been close since childhood, and I don't want to lose him, but I may need therapy to work through it. I want to thank all my friends, family, and the supportive folks on Reddit. Your help and understanding have meant a lot to me and made me feel validated in my feelings. Thank you all for being there for me. Is that Ava and I chose not to be intimate before our wedding. She insisted that we should wait until our wedding night, and despite my attempts to persuade her otherwise, I eventually agreed. While I had become less involved with the church, Ava remained fully devoted. She attended all the church programs, meetings, and events, She was even part of the evangelism team, and every weekend she went out with them to pray and spread the word. During our courtship, we limited ourselves to kissing, and she never agreed to spend the night at my place. She believed in saving herself for our wedding night, as she considered it against God's wishes to be intimate before marriage. Throughout the time I waited for Ava and me to tie the knot and finally be together physically, I believed she was a virgin. She never disclosed otherwise, so I naturally assumed she was. It was only on our wedding night that I discovered she wasn't. She confessed that she had been intimate with her previous boyfriends, but had chosen to change her ways. It took me some time to overcome the disappointment, and I tried my best not to let it affect our new marriage. Apart from discovering that she had previous relationships, which she